G'day ladies and gents, Cubic Meter here. The latest snapshot has introduced this very interesting block known as the moss block, which has the property of being able to convert other blocks around it such as stone into more moss, and then it can be broken with a piston and composted. And because only one bone meal is needed to generate a very large amount of moss, this provides a tantalizing way to get bone meal renewably. However, we need to be able to harvest the maximum and minimum range of our moss. Mojang made a proof of concept already, harvesting only the 3x3 area that is guaranteed around our moss block. The formation is quite interesting, because I'm not sure if you recognize where this is from. This is actually the same formation that I use for every single one of my TNT efficient blast chambers, all the way from my very first variant, from my very first video, all the way up to my most recent blast chamber. So it seems I might have some experience of working with this particular block shaper. So how about we take Ilmenga's proof of concept and build us a self-sustaining moss farm. To begin with, we have a 7x7 square area of potential moss blocks that we need to harvest. And I say potential because each time we bone meal our moss in the center, it is not guaranteed that all the blocks in the 7x7 area turn into moss blocks. As you can see, some stone gets left behind. So our system needs to be able to handle this leftover stone. So the really awesome thing about this formation is that it's very easy to preserve this moss block in the middle, because all we need to do is extend these out to push limit, and then once the stone reaches here, it won't be able to go further, and therefore we can push in from all four sides simultaneously without affecting this middle block. Of course, in the blast chambers, this formation is used to ensure that there is a hole in the middle for the TNT to go through into the block formation. Now I've just extended this out to push limit, and as you can see, I'll push that block in, but it won't go any further. In order to generate our stone, all we need to do is run water underneath our lava. Ooh, that doesn't look good. So there turns out to be a bit of an issue with this stone generator. If I put an obsidian here, this column of blocks can no longer move, right? So now, that stone will block off the water, and this lava will flow down. The instant I unblock this obsidian, you will see it'll start generating cobblestone in various places. And cobblestone cannot be replaced with moss. Therefore, if any cobblestone ends up in our system, it will essentially poison the system and stop it from functioning. The problem is occurring because we're relying on the water flowing all the way to the other side before it can turn to stone. And you can see it keeps failing and creating cobblestone. The solution is to ensure that for every stone generated, it has its own water source to reliably provide water. That way, we can always make sure that stone is generated and not cobblestone. And you can see if I place obsidian anywhere and force it to jam, the system runs fine despite the jam. And if I just unjam it, it picks up again fine. And this is a very important feature for us to be able to handle the random nature of the moss. I'm also using double extenders to push in the stone from the sides, and this is important for a later step. With the stone generator sorted, we now need to bone meal this moss and clear all the debris that forms on the surface. We also want to be able to collect our items directly in their entity form using water streams, because this means that we can easily add on a collection system which is scalable to whatever rates we get from the farm. However, with all this water around, we can't actually bone meal the moss. So my idea is to use pistons to clear the water like so, and then trigger our dispenser to fire on the retraction. Which we will see, hopefully, like so. As you can see, the entire platform generated moss, and then the water enveloped it afterwards. Because during the phase in which the pistons are retracting, all of this water was replaced with air. And so if we schedule our dispenser to fire at exactly the right moment, we can get it to bone meal our moss in the very instant that this area turns to air. And so now if I run the stone generator, you'll see it will replace the moss with stone, and the items will float up into the water and get pushed to wherever we want to collect them. And there we go, just reached push limit. We need to somehow detect when our stone reaches the center. One option is to simply use a clock to tell the system when to perform the moss generation. Because we have a 30 game tick clock running the stone generator, and stone needs to move a maximum of 3 times before a layer is complete. However, you can never guarantee that you will have 3 layers to complete on a particular side, which means if we go the detection route instead, it could potentially make the farm slightly faster. Our detection could come in the form of this simple cooldown clock, which is connected to an AND gate connecting all 4 sides. And what this means is, if any of the 4 sides is in the process of moving, it will simply suspend the moss generation until the layer is complete. Then once the cooldown clock hits 0, we can then use that to trigger the moss generation. Here's where we need to get our timings right. I want this dispenser to fire in the precise moment that these sticky pistons have finished retracting the trapdoors. If we fire the dispenser too early, then it will simply fire into the trapdoors. Fire too late, and the water would have covered most of the area by time we can generate the moss. Now, it just happens that the time that it takes for these sticky pistons to extend, grab onto, and then retract these trapdoors is exactly equal to the internal delay of the dispenser, which is 4 game ticks. This means that all I need to do is send a pulse to these sticky pistons at the exact same time that I send a pulse to the dispenser. And this is where reference points for your timings become very useful. I'm using this note block right here as my reference point. So this is essentially a junction from which I will split the signal between the dispenser and the piston roof. Replacing our note block with a piston means that it will multiply any input we send by 2. This will allow a single input signal to trigger the entire operation from our pistons. In order to ensure that we match the retraction of the sticky pistons with the firing of the dispenser, I simply have a T flip-flop, which in this position will simply power the droppers, sending more bone meal to the dispenser, before it will then extend again, powering this dropper, which will also power our dispenser on the return. If I count from my reference point, I get 2 game ticks from this observer, 2 game ticks from this sticky piston extending, and 2 game ticks from this observer. In total, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 game ticks before we begin to trigger the dispenser. Copying the delay for the other side in order to power our pistons, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, meaning if I trigger this piston, we should see a growth operation go to completion. There we go. The moss properly generated in the full area. With the stone generator running, all I need to do is start up this fader clock, and the farm should run automatically. Alright, this is a working proof of concept, but it is painfully slow. So how about we kick this thing into overdrive? This is where a few key design decisions has given us more options in order to expand this farm. By using water streams, we have an unlimited collection speed. And because we have our stone generators off to the side, out of the way, we also have the option to add additional stone generators on the top and underneath in order to increase our stone production. So here we have a triple stone generation module capable of generating 12 stone blocks every 30 game ticks. And another thing I noticed is that because 3 blocks is the maximum amount that you need to push in from any given side, with 3 stone generation modules, every 30 game ticks we can start a sequence which will push in the stone as quickly as possible in order to use additional time in order to perform the moss generation. We can see now that this fader clock is set to too long of a duration to be of any use. This stone generator is capable of filling up to 3 layers within 15 game ticks, which gives us an additional 15 game ticks until the next stone generation cycle in order to perform our moss generation. The issue that I'm now encountering is that this sequence has such a long delay in it that is now ticking over to the next stone generation cycle before we can start inputting more stone. So what we want to do is identify sources of unnecessary delay and potentially replace them with zero tick systems. I also want to find a fader clock with a much shorter cooldown than this. For experimentation, I found that this combination of repeaters gives the shortest delay between detecting the stone moving and retracting this piston, while also maintaining a continuous output while the stone is coming in every 5 game ticks. Because remember, our stone generator is doing 3 sets in 15 game ticks, which means the pulses are separated by 5 game ticks each. In order to ensure I can output a redstone signal the very instant this piston retracts, I'm going to use dust redirection. So what will happen is, the very instant this piston begins to retract, it will expose this powered dust to this line, which will send our signal to perform our moss generation. Like so. To make sure that our signal has enough power to reach all of these pistons at the top, I'm going to be replacing this redstone dust line with this sort of vertical instant repeater, which has a similar system at the top, which will retract a block, exposing this powered dust to our pistons. Meaning, the very instant that this will extend, this will retract, giving our pistons the pulse at exactly the same time as our dispenser firing. So now, if we take this bad boy for a spin, you can see we are now hitting that 30 game tick window for the stone generation cycle. Ooh. In fact, it seems that it's so fast that the water's not even able to reach the end. The water travels a block every 5 game ticks. And if we count, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The 7 multiplied by 5 gives us 35 game ticks. But most of the time, our system is deleting the water every 30 game ticks. Meaning our items don't actually get enough momentum to reach the end. But what I can try to do is add additional water to the sides here in order to reduce the distance in which the water has to travel. However, it seems like it's still just not enough. Alright, so to nudge the items just that little bit further, I've added this double piston extender, which physically pushes the items over the edge here. I've also added these 3 glass blocks, which will cause all the items to essentially bounce around a bit in order to hit the water streams and get that little bit of extra momentum to knock them over the edge. And now, from what I can see, all of the items eventually make their way to our collection side. So all that's left to do is grab our stone generator and copy it to all 4 sides, then connect them together so we can start them all at once. And here we have it, a fully functional moss farm. We're producing about 80,000 items per hour. 57 of those are moss blocks, and then we have the additional items that are generated. If we look in the middle, we can see the moss disappearing very quickly with these stone generators running at full bore. And our items flowing like crazy out of the center of the farm. And here is the farm with a system added in order to recycle the bone meal back into the chamber. Which means that this system is self-sustainable and produces a respectable 4,500 bone meal per hour profit, which is about half hopper speed. Of course, however, this may change in later snapshots if Mojang decides that they want to nerf this particular farm. However, even if the moss had only a 35% chance to create a layer in the composter, this farm would still be self-sustainable. So I'd expect this farm would at least be nerfed to reduce the rate of bone meal that you can get out of it. However, it's very unlikely that it will end up being completely unsustainable. And even if the bone meal production from this farm was nerfed, it would still be a really good early game source of bone meal in order to run some basic farms. So with that, we have a self-sustaining bone meal farm. Well, for now at least. I'll be leaving a schematic of the build down in the description if you want to take a gander for yourself. Let me know whether this farm should be nerfed or not. Do you think we deserve a sustainable bone meal farm? Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.